Howdy, howdy, howdy. Welcome to another Collection Connection, where we continue to play that game that's just an excuse to talk about records. On Monday, my brother, Plastic Eric, made his play over on his channel, the Plastic Soundwave Cult. He presented the sixth and final studio album from The Jam, which was The Gift from 1982. And after a string of albums from the 80s, I'm going to hoist us forward about 15 years by talking about an album from 1997, that being Spiritualized's third record. Ladies and gentlemen, we are floating in space. These two seemingly unrelated albums share a particular facet or quirk, but I ain't going to tell you what it is. Instead, I challenge you to figure it out and leave your guess down in the comments. First, we need to officially reveal the previous connection. As I said, Eric showed The Jam's The Gift, and he connected that to my last play, which was a-ha's Hunting High and Low album. And the connection, at least the connection as he put it, is that they were three-man bands, three-person bands, a trio, in a band with a three-letter name, but I think you could take exception to The Jam being a band with a three-letter name. But I will note that the three-man lineup, which is verifiable and factual and indisputable, the three-man lineup for each band never changed. It's written in stone with The Jam. The same three guys that started the band were in the band till the end. And at least to this point in time, a-ha, who's still active, is still made up with the three guys that founded the band. So good on you if you figured that out. The trio part of the connection was guessed successfully by our good friend Murdoch from over on Murdoch's Music Minute. You can check out his latest video where he goes over the Eurovision entrants one by one and kind of gives his view on each of the songs over, again, on his channel, Murdoch's Music Minute. But with all that out of the way, let's get on with the show. All right, so Eric did show The Gift by The Jam, which is an album that I have, sort of. I want to point out that The Jam also connects to Eric's last play, Stiff Little Fingers. I forgot to mention this, that I found this out in the video last week, that Bruce Foxton, the bassist for The Jam, joined Stiff Little Fingers as the bassist for quite a time, like 15 years was the bassist before he left and the original bassist came back and joined the group. I recognized the name and went, whoa, he was the bassist in Stiff Little Fingers for a while? And he was. So that's a little side connection for you to Eric's last play. But as far as my impression of The Jam, I feel like I've talked about them a little bit recently. What I have is a box set that I went from, they were one of those bands I went from having a best of collection sort of, and that collection was called Snap. In the style of many British bands from the time, they released singles that were not on the album, although they did also release singles from albums. But in order to get all those singles in one place, you had to buy more than just their studio albums. You had to get the Snap collection. So I went from that to a box set that was everything that they did, but somewhat annoyingly, even though they had 6 studio albums, this was all condensed down to 5 CDs, including those non-album singles. And when a single was taken from an album, they pulled that out of the album's running order to sort of represent the single with its B-sides. And so between the track list being messed with and the fact that different albums would sort of bridge and get cut off halfway through different discs, it was all just kind of too much. It was just too much. And so what I did a few years back is I went back, sort of manually recreated the albums, put them in on my iTunes library in the original release order, gave them the album artwork, said that that's what they were as albums, so that I could listen to a Jam album at a time in a more deliberate fashion than just throwing on this thing that could start in the middle of the third album and end with sort of the B-sides from the fourth album. But even after having done that, I haven't listened to them a super ton. It was just kind of too much. But I have listened to The Gift. I think if Eric looks at, he mentioned Running on the Spot as a song that he possibly liked. I think if he checks out one of the CDs, the compilations that I sent him a few years ago, the one with the pyramid made out of Rubik's Cubes on the cover, you'll find Running on the Spot is on that particular compilation. So that is one that caught my ear. It has a very, to my ear, Dear Prudence kind of chord progression, kind of a descending, where the top stays the same but the bottom kind of descends for a bit, and it feels very much like Dear Prudence to me in parts, and I like the song quite a bit. And it is the album where A Town Called Malice is from, and that is a favorite of mine. It was kind of probably the one that flipped my opinion on the Jam. I remember when Beat Surrender came out, they announced that they were going to break up after supporting the single, and Paul Weller was going to go off and do Style Council instead, and that went kind of straight to number one, and I remember hating it at the time. It was just annoyed by it. But the memories of going underground, and then again, as a band my wife really enjoyed, Style Council, one of her favorites is Town Called Malice, and that one really won me over. And overall, I listened to it a couple times here in the last couple of days. I'm spending probably a lot more time than I usually do talking about the previous album, but as one that I have and sort of have some impressions of, I guess, that I'm giving myself some leeway. But I think it's good. I'm not sure if Precious, the single, which was the other single I believe taken off of this album, was as long as it is on the album, because it's almost 6 minutes long. I think it's pretty good. I like the horns that proliferate throughout the album, and you know, the bass lines, Bruce Foxton's bass lines, are pretty kick-ass. And even though the tracks still at this point, if it's not one that I already knew, don't stand out to me, I think they're still enjoyable. There was the Trans-Europe Express. I don't know if I'm getting that mixed up with the Kraftwerk track, or Trans-Global Express, maybe something like that. But I didn't love the song, but it had a great bass line groove to it. And overall, it's a quick album to listen to, and I did a couple times over, and it's good. And it's good to be able to familiarize myself, take that one step closer to knowing this music that I already own. So good on Eric for playing that and giving me an excuse to pull it out and listen to it. And as far as a connection, I will be talking about Spiritualized. Ladies and gentlemen, we're floating in space, which, as you'll quickly see here, has a completely different cover to what I'm showing in the graphic here. It was reissued in 2021, along with their first 4 albums, this being the third of the 4, with new cover art. It annoys me that that happens sometimes. One of my biggest pet peeves is when they change the cover art on a reissue. I hated it when Phil Collins did it. It was a cool idea, you know, Phil Collins, older, recreating his album covers, but just give me the original album cover. Is it that hard? Or give me the option to display it that way. And I kind of wish the same here. It doesn't have anything on it. I think it is meant to resemble sort of a pill pack. I think there was a pharmaceutical theme going on, even with the original artwork. And this, in fact, what it makes me think of is the Pet Shop Boys that I talked about not that long ago. The original CD cover of that being actually molded orange plastic with dots on it, but after the first run of them, the cover became sort of like this, like a from the corner 3D sort of rendering of the dots cover, just on flat paper. I don't love it, but that is how it was. When I picked it up at Amoeba Records in 2021 when I was out in California visiting Eric. We went to Amoeba together, and Spiritualized has been one of those things that has been on my radar for a long time, for 20 years now, and the kind of thing that, again, coming across in a music store. I've talked about this several times recently. You come across in a music store and that's when you buy it, rather than just deciding, I'm just going to order it through Amazon or Discogs or wherever. And so seeing it, I decided to get it in spite of the fact that it didn't have the same cover on it. But taking it home, I like it quite a bit. I don't know that I feel like it is the masterpiece that a lot of publications, both at the time and since, have given it. I'm not sure how I started that sentence, but I don't know that I love it as much as the general public seems to, because I think it maybe loses steam a little for me as it goes on, but it starts out like dynamite. I love the title track, Ladies and Gentlemen, We're Floating in Space, which now has the parenthetical subtitle, Can't Help Falling in Love, because it incorporates the Elvis song, Can't Help Falling in Love, into its playtime. And I believe that they were taken to court on that originally, and the original release of the album does not include the lyrics that were always intended. They had to take them off of I Can't Help Falling in Love, but they have since cleared it, okayed it, done whatever, so at least I do have that going for this particular issue. I have the song as intended, and I love it with those lyrics on it. And it is very floaty, and then it takes a hard left turn on Come Together, the next song, which is just pummeling. And again, I think is a great tune, so it's a great 1-2 punch. And I Think I'm in Love, which is the third track, goes back into kind of more of that floaty space, and that's kind of the first time the brakes hit a little bit, because I think the song is great, but I don't necessarily think it's 8 minutes great. I think it was a single, so I'm curious as to how much that was cut down for single form. I might, if there was a single edit of it, I may prefer that to the album, because it just doesn't repeat. And I think that is a lot of what Spiritualized is about, is kind of a droning and a repetition. Sometimes it's very light and floaty and pretty, and sometimes it's just gritty and noisy, but it's always very layered, and it's always very repetitive. And all that's okay. I don't know, Electricity is a good song. I think the individual, I'm not even sure if, I never seem to get through the entirety of the album while paying attention, but that one may just be sort of a kind of a raucous white noise thing going on. And by the time you get to the ending song, Cop Shoot Cop, which is, I think, like 14 minutes long, and has a middle bit that is, or at least feels like, as long as that track, The Individual, that just kind of descends into noise and grit. I think that kind of stuff is cool as a texture, kind of for a short time, but when it's going on for minutes at a time, I don't love it nearly as much, and it eventually makes its way out of it again, back into something a little prettier. And it's not that the music has to be pretty to me, but I don't necessarily want it to be a chore to listen to. And some of that white noise, it feels thematic and right, and yet that doesn't make it fun for me to listen to. So it's well done, and yet I kind of wish it wasn't there, because the songs that rein it in a little more, that are in the more 3 to 5 minute range, are the ones that I like the best. But with that, I don't have a whole lot more on that, except to say that if you think you have an idea what the connection is between Spiritualized, Ladies and Gentlemen, We Are Floating in Space, and The Gift from the Jam, you can leave that guess down in the comments. And if we get a right answer, first right answer, we'll get a shout out in the next video. I will tell you that the connection is connected to the albums specifically, not the artists, and it is nothing that you're going to find doing any research whatsoever. It's not on Wikipedia, it's not on Discogs. It is, I think, an easy connection if you basically watched this video and watched Eric's video. Would kind of give you what the connection is between those two videos. But no amount of research outside of those two videos is going to tell you what the connection is. So with that, I think I'm going to tap out. So I thank you for watching. Bye-bye. Good show, Ponsonby.